Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome to September's Virtual Speech webinar, VR Training 101 with Meta, SkillsVR and VirtualSpeech. Today, we'll be looking at VR as a training tool from implementation to scaling and real-world use cases. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Sophie Thompson, co-founder and CEO of VirtualSpeech, the leading provider of VR soft skills training. We use virtual reality, mixed reality, and online simulations and role plays to improve skills by 25% in just 10 minutes. And today I'm joined by David Hsu from Meta Reality Labs, who currently leads sales in North America, and James Coddington, CEO of SkillsVR. So we want this webinar to be interactive, so please feel free to drop your comments and questions. I know lots of you have already sent in questions, so I'll ask as many of them as I can as well. But yeah, would love your live questions too. So let's get started with a warm-up question for our guests first. So everybody on this panel has been in the industry for a long time. So my first question to you is, what is the biggest change you've seen in the industry in the last 2 years? And James, I'll come to you first.
Okay, perfect. I'd have to say hardware. The rapid advancement in the hardware has allowed companies like ourselves to take our training to the next level. When we first started, I think it was 8 years ago, we paid $8,000 for our first headset, and it was tethered, so we couldn't take it out of our lab. We had different positioning that it had to be in, so it was not scalable and it was not mobile. Now we're looking at these incredible headsets that Meta are bringing out. The Quest 3, we've got the Quest 3S coming out, I think this week. And what you're able to do with those and the price points that they're at has been a revolution for our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And David, what do you think has been the biggest change in the last 2 years?
I agree with James. I mean, the technology's been great. But I also have to give a hands up to a lot of our developers as well as the ecosystem and software. Companies like VirtualSpeech, SkillsVR has really upped the game as far as what kind of content we can bring into VR headsets. And they kind of have to match, right? You have to have the technology with the hardware, match with the software. So those are going hand in hand improvements and walking in parallel, which is an exciting time for the entire business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to, before we get started into more questions, I wanted to get a feel for who our audience are. So what stage they're at with their VR journey, whether that's right at the start and just exploring VR for learning, or if they're at trial stage, scale stage, etc. So we have created a little poll. So on your screen now, you can scan that QR code, or just go to menti.com and then enter the code there, which is 7952818. But I think it's probably just easier to scan the QR code. So I'll wait a couple of minutes for people to do that. Oh. Okay, so looks like we've still got some answers coming in, but so far early stage. We have somebody who works ingrained in company culture. That's awesome. Okay, we're getting a bit more of a split. Proof of concept. Okay, so looks like most people are at an early stage or proof of concept stage, and then we've got a handful of people who are at a scaling stage and even ingrained in company culture, which is really interesting. So we will be covering each one of those stages, but it's just useful for us to know where people are at. Oh, we've still got people coming in. Okay, that is good to know, and hopefully good for everybody else to know that they're not alone in whichever stage they're at. Everybody's at different stages. So I wanted to start off, especially for those people who are just an exploratory stage, about talking about VR as a training tool in general. So in what specific training scenarios does VR offer the most significant advantage over traditional methods? So why would people choose to use VR over e-learning or face-to-face facilitation, or why would people use VR training to complement one of those more traditional methods? And I'll leave it to you guys, whoever wants to answer that first.
Yeah, I'll go for that. I think anything that is experiential, that takes you into the experience and replicates the learning by doing, has the most the best outcomes. And also anything that is dangerous. So we find if you have a dangerous scenario or a significantly enhanced dangerous scenario that you cannot replicate in VR, that you cannot replicate in e-learning and you can replicate in VR, it really provides the learner a visceral experience. And what I mean by that is when you put the headset on, after 15 seconds, your brain believes it's real. And so by your brain thinking that experience is real, you're able to create physiological responses to that training that you cannot deliver in an e-learning or face-to-face environment. Mm-hmm. And those visceral experiences really makes the learning outcomes so much more powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I still love seeing people who try VR for the first time and they haven't really been convinced about it being realistic before. Then they put on the headset and you can see them trying to touch a desk in front of them. Or only last week I did a demo and somebody was like, wow, the water bottle is so realistic. And there was just a water bottle on this virtual desk. And they were like, wow, that's crazy. And David, can you speak a bit to how do VR training outcomes compare to more traditional methods in terms of return on investment, employee performance, time, those kinds of things? Oh, you're on mute, David.
Sorry about that. So I was mentioning that there was quite a bit of study and work out there in research that has shown that immersive learning, training VR has actually huge productivity gains as far as how fast you learn. And the best example is, even for my kid right now, I'm trying to teach him how to play basketball and shoot, where to guard, how to dribble, this and that. And it's one thing to explain to him on paper and just talk through it. It's definitely a different thing by actually doing. And like James said, a lot of this is actually doing and learning on the job and be able to exercise and have your mental brain go through the systems and processes right there and then, which actually increases productivity significantly. I've seen surgeons and med students perform surgeries 256 times faster than somebody who studied on a book. I've seen students retain information and knowledge in regards to different environmental studies and education to be 150 times better. So the real world impact is true. And the way I would see it is, a long time ago, everything was hands-on training. You're in classroom training. Then it moved a little bit into e-learning to adopt to masses and get a little bit more ease of use. I think with the VR applications, we actually have brought those two together. And now you co-locate, you could collaborate together, you can learn together anywhere in the world, and nothing stops you from that. And being there is, like you said, the water bottle, high-fiving somebody in VR. It's incredible. It's something that you can't explain right now. And I wouldn't be doing it justice by saying people just have to try it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so if people are looking to implement VR learning in their organization, what are the key first steps that they should take? So if they're brand new to VR, what would you recommend being the first steps that they take?
Yeah, I think there's, definitely reach out to, myself, James, as well as you, Sophie, just to understand, what they want to try to accomplish. I think the number one priority is, and I'd say understand technology and see what it can actually do for you, as opposed to, hey, it's cool, I just want to buy one and fiddle around with it. The honest truth is, if you have a good use case and you have a problem that you need to solve, focus on the problem first, understanding what the problem is, finding how much pain it causes within the company, what the value of solving that pain is the best path to implementing VR. Just because it gives you direct ROI of your investment and gives you a plan to move forward. There's obviously many steps in between, but the first things first is understanding what your problems are and what you want to prioritize on.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think L&D needs more tech just for the sake of it, which might just create more problems. They need to use the tech to solve the existing problems that they have. And
that's,
oh God.
Sorry, I just want to elaborate on that. Just, many companies, they understand that and they don't really talk about too much, but it just creates more efficiency, repeatability, standardizes the process. And again, retention is better. So there's lots of applications for that. And I think, more and more companies are understanding the value of that. And again, tech for tech is probably not necessary. There's a lot of other tech we have already, but focusing on the problem is really going to be key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. James, is there anything that you would add there in terms of first steps?
Yeah, I agree with David around you really do need to center yourself around a problem you're trying to solve. And a lot of the problems that we see, which is a great start, are some of the areas that they've really challenged to try and get a cut through with their traditional training. And we see a lot of people starting in some of those dangerous situations. It might be, in their warehouses, or it might be in their office environment, or it might be de-escalating conflict, or it might be, some of those really challenging situations that they can't provide good training outcomes in their traditional way. This is where they come to, and you're able to provide a really strong ROI around that, and being really centered and having your whole organization in behind it rather than just the innovation team. We've seen quite a few opportunities where companies could roll it out a lot more effectively by getting the buy-in across their organization. And that's from the top all the way down, and understanding what they're trying to achieve, everyone understanding what the process is, and buying into that. Because if it's just being led by one team, and perhaps the innovation team, we don't see as much success across the board.
Mm-hmm. So who are some of the other teams that you've seen it's been really helpful to have involved in those conversations?
We always try to start in the L&D space. So for us, it's been really successful it could be chief people officer, it could be the chief learning officer, whatever the size of the organization, the person who is responsible for the people and for their productivity and for their training across the organization. And from there, ideally they're sitting in the C-suite as well. So they're part of the executive team, which allows them to, one, have a budget, and two, be able to deliver that with authority. And what we find is a lot of it is change management. So you go through the same processes you would go through if you're implementing any other form of technology. It's really important that they have good discipline around change management, and they have the authority to deliver that, which from an executive level, and usually the executive level has the sponsorship for the program, and we see that having the best outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there anything you would add there, David?
No, I agree. I think executive sponsorship is probably number one, just to make sure there's proper alignment within the different teams and understand the objectives. And I would implore everyone to get their executives into a demo, one that really resonates with what you guys are trying to achieve. Time and time again, I meet various CEOs, and they're always like, I don't want to do this, or I'm not sure about this. But then once you put it on and I ask them for 5 minutes, they're in there for half an hour. So it is really impactful to be head and headset. The other couple teams that might also that we see engage a lot are usually IT teams, maybe security teams. Them having knowledge of it is actually key, just because it is hardware based. Those are the teams that usually own some of that development and management of those devices. So something to consider, but executive alignment, agree with James, is important.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of hardware, a question that we often get asked when people are early stage is around headsets. What's the difference between headsets? Even across providers like Meta, for example, you have the Pro, the Quest 3. What's the difference between each of those headsets, and which would you recommend for enterprise?
I'm obviously biased with our headsets, of course, and I do feel that us as Meta, we really focus on providing value for our customers in businesses, and trying to figure out the best way to get to scale and allow them and everybody to have access to a headset. And I think that allows our headsets to be best in breed as far as hardware, but also best in price as well. There's obviously 3 right now in the market: the Quest 2s, Quest 3s, and Quest Pros. The way I would see it is, the Quest 2 is a great opening device. Allows it's a very affordable price. Allows everybody to have that VR experience that people are trying and using. Great for education, great for large scale deployments. Our Quest 3 model is a focus on mixed reality, which allows you to see pass through. So not only do you see things in VR, but you actually see your own environment in the world, which is pretty amazing, and be able to do augmented reality in the mixed reality space. And that one is currently are very popular, just because it applies to every single aspect of using VR and MR. And then finally, we have our Quest Pro, which is my personal favorite device. It's well balanced. The technology in there is excellent. It is a pro model, definitely for our business users. The comfort, everything about it is top notch. But they are segmented by different price points, and I think it depends on specific applications, the volume and scale you're using it at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then when it comes to software and solution providers, what do you think that people should be looking for? So obviously it depends by use case, but are there certain criteria that you would always recommend people to look for?
Well, I think there's quite a few software providers out there, and I think that's it's important to make sure your goals are aligned with what the provider can do. I think for VirtualSpeech, for example, there's a very specific use case that aligns with what VirtualSpeech does, and you guys do it excellently. Incorporate AI and so on and so forth. So somebody's looking for soft skills training, it's a great opportunity to do that. And then some companies do a lot more customization than others. For example, James and Skills, they customize a lot of work. They do very specific, and they have a library of content as well, which if someone wants to get started really fast, that applies really good. But personally, I think that what's important is again, understanding the specific use case, seeing if there is somebody who's already done it before or has a product or something similar, and then determining how much customization you may or may not need for your very specific use case. If you're doing a development and custom training on a $3 million med device, then you'll probably need some heavy customization for that, and understanding the specific models, the 3D models that go into that project. In that case, you definitely need somebody that's a little bit more focused on the customization part. But again, there are a lot of great providers out there, and it's good to just understand each one's skill set in alignment with your project.
Mm-hmm. And James, obviously with SkillsVR, you've seen a lot of different deployments from pilots through to scaling. What are some of the common mistakes that you've seen organizations making, and how do you recommend that they can avoid some of them?
Yeah, I would say the number one would be not aligning their executive with their plan. So often some of these opportunities are driven from whether it be an innovation team, or whether it be L&D, or whether it be some other part of the business, and they don't bring in an executive sponsor, and it only goes so far. So after the POC, they get these great results, but they don't have a budget to take it any further. And that would be probably the most common, what I call, failure in our eyes. And certainly in the early years of our operation, we we ended up doing a lot of work with the innovation teams, and they wouldn't go much further because they didn't have a budget from the executive. So we learned we've learned over time that very early on, you need to ensure that there is a sponsor at the executive that holds budget that can take the project beyond a POC. POCs are great for companies to understand the solution and try the hardware and the software, but really to be successful, it needs to be implemented into the business. And that's when change management comes in. That's when you bring in your existing processes, which, as David said, very important to get the IT team on board early on. And that's when there's usually audits around the technology, which they go through whether you're a SOC 2 certified or not. And then they go through the procurement processes, which, depending on the size of the company, can take months to go through. So the last thing you want to do is go through that whole process and actually come out the other end without a sponsor that can take the project beyond the POC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and David, have you found any other key mistakes that people can perhaps avoid by following your advice?
Yeah, I would probably, I would say don't really lean too hard on the POC, to be honest. I think, for example, when people buy computers, they buy iPhones for their teams, they buy large software deployments. I just don't believe they do as much POC work as they do in VR right now. And the reason for that is because they know it works, people have bought it, this and that. There's actually quite a bit of studies, and there's just already contextual examples of various companies using VR for their work and the impact it does. The POC technically just slows down and it dilutes the message of like, hey, what are we trying to do here? And I think that if you're going to do it, make sure you get the budget alignment with your executives and the problem, because there are plenty of different examples and pre-made content that could get people to experience it. And I think that's what they're trying to do in some POCs, is just getting people experienced in it. But we know the outcome is going to be great. So like they're just delaying the process. And I think just generating that, first step sometimes takes a significant amount of time. And I would say if you're able to plan well and get the buy-in and get the experience going, move from POC directly to, a small deployment or, a strong deployment to, get it going. I just see a lot of people trying to get people experience it versus like a true POC, and the outcomes are always really, really well received.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think sometimes a POC is more of a formality that people have to go through. And I think on both sides, whether that's as vendors like us or actually people in the organization, it's quite easy to get stuck on just getting the POC started. That we also need to be a bit more long-term, have more of a long-term vision of it on both sides, because obviously everybody's investing time and money into this POC. So what does success look like? And if we do find that, which as we know, you most likely will, then what's the next step there? And how do you both handle any skepticism or resistance that you might come across, whether that's in a POC stage or further down the line of whether that's end users or managers who might be resistant to using VR learning?
I put a headset on them.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like, seeing is believing, and there's no world of justice I could do and explain, hey, this is not like Roblox, and you're not in this 3D world and just playing on a computer. I mean, it's the difference between like watching a movie at home and being in the movie. Like, it is that vast of a difference. And I think that really changes people's perspective. And also understanding what their challenges are. Is it a costing? Is it a time thing? Is it a sourcing problem? But again, a lot of that gets diffused pretty fast once they try it themselves. And James has, I know James has seen it as well.
Yeah. I think that's also where the mixed reality of the Quest 3 is really helpful too, because we find that sometimes people are scared to put on a headset in front of people and they feel quite vulnerable and like they'll be blocked off from the world around them. But then having a mixed reality headset and they put it on and they can still see around them, we found that that's actually been really helpful in terms of people who feel vulnerable to put on a headset in front of other people. One of the other things that we've seen in terms of, I guess this is more moving from POC to full implementation, is around managing a larger number of devices. And as we know, you can use MDM tools, and one of those tools is Quest for Business. Could you just tell us a little bit about what Quest for Business is, and how that can benefit people when they're looking into scaling a larger number of headsets and VR learning across the organization?
Absolutely. Yeah, Quest for Business is our management tool for devices. As you can understand, with large deployments in the hundreds and thousands, it's really challenging to deploy the headsets, understand where they are, deploying the applications. So Quest for Business is a first-party tool that allows the admins, the IT resources to focus on security, make sure there's proper user management, devices management, make sure there's app management as well. Within the bundle, we provide customer support. And one of the things that we focus on really heavily is on security of our devices, which is why we have this first-party tool. In addition to that, there's plenty of other features, and we're coming out with new features every single month that relate with what Quest for Business is, and eventually evolve into something that's just more than just an MDM. But there are features right now that we just released, like shared mode, single app mode, for shared mode, allow people to do casting, and really allow the admins to control the fleet of whatever they need it for. And then if you're doing a mixed fleet, we also support third-party MDMs such as VMware, Intune, MobileIron. So we really build a suite that allows people to customize as they need.
Mm-hmm. And integrate with other MDMs that they already use in the organization as well, which I think is helpful from an IT perspective too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of some use cases, are there specific industries or sectors that you see as currently leading the way in adopting VR for enterprise training? And that's to either one of you.
I would say as it gets more mature, more and more industries are adopting it. But I would say some of the first adopters that we've seen have been a lot of large DCs, so distribution centers. We've seen the financial services and retail. So one of the big use cases that we've seen post-COVID has been de-escalation of conflict. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, we all woke up post-COVID very grumpy and very agitated and with no patience, and that has translated into some violent and aggressive behaviour towards frontline workers. So that goes across the board from quick service restaurants through to retail environments, through to airlines. So a lot of those use cases, and I go back to one of the original questions of, what's the powerful use cases? It's anything that can be translated in a doing scenario that provides visceral experiences that prepare workers better for their jobs. And one of those is making them safer in the workplace, and others is making them more confident and competent in their roles, and being able to use VR in very short, succinct modules really helps them prepare. And we love partnering with VirtualSpeech because your modules really prepare both from an executive level all the way down to people first day on the job to do some things that I think a lot of people believe it's more scary than death, which is public speaking, and not just public speaking, but presenting and taking them into environments that have really challenged them in the past, and now we have a tool that can help them prepare for what has been super scary for them in their jobs. So I think as far as industry sectors, we're really seeing a wide adoption now, and as it gets further along, we're going to see, I believe we're getting to the inflection point of mass adoption, and it becomes business as usual. It becomes a BAU, and it's part of every L&D team's tools. and it'll never take over. And I don't think that has ever been the goal, that to take over all training, but it certainly provides a lot of value by having its place within the L&D arsenal, or the tools that they're able to create and deliver to their people.
And I love that you touched on not just the competence, but the confidence as well, because that's at the heart of what we do, and what I see as one of the biggest pulls of VR training is you're not just equipping people with skills, but you're equipping them with the confidence to use those skills. Because there's no point, especially, well, actually across the board, whether it's soft skills or other skills, there's no point knowing how to present or how to have a difficult conversation if you haven't got the confidence to actually go out there and do it. And VR gives you that safe place to practice that, so that you do have that confidence. And David, would you agree with what James has seen in the industry, or are there any other sectors or verticals that you've seen as leading the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see every industry, to be honest, like coming in and trying it out, and really building use cases that affect their specific needs and demands. Like, as you guys have spoken, soft skills, for example, transcends all industries. Whether you're in a hospital, you're in a retail space, you're working at an auto manufacturing plant. I mean, it's so important across the board. And having VR in soft skills really transforms the way that you can actually learn. Because now, if it's very different performing in front of people and a manager and everything else, but to be able to do it on your own accord, have that feedback, separately, and understanding how to better yourself, is really impactful. Some other industries that, we've seen some great adoption is, obviously EDU. That matters a lot just because they're naturally in the business of training and learning. Automotive has been pretty well received, as well as healthcare. But really across the gamut, we see every industry doing a very specific, or a few different use cases that apply to them.
Mm-hmm. And maybe if I come to both of you, and if maybe both you could just give me one example of a successful implementation of VR that you've seen. So David, I'll start with you there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's to be honest, there's so many, and I think that's you Google VR for work, and you'll still find a ton of use cases. The ones I like to see, and I've seen this across the board in repeatability, is definitely in schools, and especially higher ed schools, vocational schools, specific ones that do a very specific training. Nursing comes to mind. So there's quite a few nursing schools that have adopted VR specifically to train their nurses for a variety of reasons, whether it's cost, whether it's time, it's speed, consistency, and that allows them to train at a very different level, especially when you have to be hands-on training, to be learning even if you're away from the classroom. There's opportunities for collaboration with that space, and I've seen many schools deploy thousands of devices at a time every single quarter to their students. And it's repeatable. It's something that they've done and scaled out a specific program for. What's also exciting is that I can't wait to see what people are going to come up with next as far as training and opportunity. The education space, whether it's doctors, nurses, they're going to continue to grow, and their repertoire of classes will continue to grow. But I think there's a real excitement in seeing what creative opportunities from aerospace can come out to automotive, and it's really cool, and I can't wait to experience it.
Absolutely. And James, how about you in terms of successful VR implementation?
Yeah, it's a really hard question because there's so many. And when you were talking about it, I went straight to a program that we're launching this week with our Minister for Employment, which is our schools program, which has been operating for 2 years. And why that's so powerful is, our schools program is free of charge. We deliver it free of charge to all schools around the world. And we have, it's about 4,000 deployments in schools in the US, but here in New Zealand, every single one of the high schools, it's compulsory. So the government pays for the headsets. The headsets are deployed in the schools. And why it's so powerful is we're teaching employability skills. So the skills that are so incredibly important for students when they leave school to get an employment or get into the workforce, they're not taught at school. It is very much about academic rigors and the academic achievements, but it's all good and well having the academic achievements, but we need to have employability skills. So we provide a program that is supported by enterprise customers that allows young people to gain employability skills for when they leave school. And so we do this thing called 1 for 1, where every enterprise customer who buys a license, they're able to choose a school that they can support and provide their schools program free of charge. And we do some of our larger businesses donate their headsets. Walmart donated 17,500 headsets for us to be able to utilize in schools. And Bank of America have also donated a significant amount of headsets for us to use in schools. So when it becomes end of life for the enterprise, we're able to reprovision those and put them back into schools for the needs and for the use cases around employability skills. So that's probably something that is very dear to my heart because it's part of our DNA. It's why we exist. We don't make money from it, but we certainly change lives with it, and it's really powerful.
Wow, I love that. That's amazing. So is that in New Zealand or is that across different countries?
Different countries. So we have it operating in 4 countries currently, and our goal is to slowly, as our enterprise business grows, we're able to deploy it in all countries. And so we're really excited to work with our partners because one of the biggest costs of that is headsets. So when the headsets become, and this is the exciting thing about what Meta are doing, as they bring out new headsets, new technology, some of the companies want to use that new technology. So they look for homes for their old headsets. And that's where we come in and take their older headsets and redeploy them into the schools. So at the moment, we're not in UK yet, but that is certainly something that we are working towards.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So just a final question from me, and then we'll go to audience questions. So it's around really where you see or how you see VR evolving over the next 5-10 years. And basically, when do you think that XR will become mainstream? And by that, I mean, not for other use cases, specifically L&D. And what do you think has to happen before that point?
David, you go first.
I think there's a lot of things that can happen, right? And I think for it to go mainstream, and by the way, the business is doing significant improvements on the devices, the scale of it, how fast they operate. In some industries, I do think it is somewhat mainstream already to use VR in a lot of specific industries, healthcare, biotech. It may not be as well known, and that might be for business reasons or whatnot, but there's definitely some great adoption of that. And I think one of the biggest things that is holding people back, and this is back to another question we had earlier, was I think there's a perception of what VR is that we have to, as an industry, overcome. And the reason for that is because they've tried VR maybe a few years ago. Maybe they tried it on their kids' game or whatnot. And there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that influence the experience, what they saw, what they learned, and changing that perception of what VR is will, I think, really impact the business. And for example, VR, the craze was a few years ago, and it's slowed down a little bit, which is actually a good thing for the business because it allows us to focus on the most important things. But that preconceived notion is something that once that gets overcome a little bit, if you realize the potential, will really help your company scale. My best example is when I have a CEO that comes, it tries for 5 minutes and stays for 30. I mean, they had a preconceived notion before, and I think once we get over that, we could improve much better. And I guess also the last year, we've seen some huge advancements in AI, and the ability for AI to potentially support VR as well is going to be really incredible in the next few years. I think that's going to be a game changer in how we build applications to engage in training scenarios. I think that adoption is really going to fast track a lot of the business in VR and MR.
Yeah, and I agree with all of those things. In our business, when we first started, we call it the VR maturity index. So, the 1 to 5, and we did that poll at the start. We find a lot of people start at if there's an index from 1 to 5, 5 being mature, 1 being immature. One of the things that we see, which we did see last year, was a blocker for a lot of businesses to really scale it out across their organizations, was the cost and the time it took to create content. And a lot of the large organizations really are focused on bespoke solutions to their problems. So we and I say we here collectively, the industry, needed to solve that problem in order for it to become mainstream, because otherwise it takes too long, and it also costs too much to create many different scenarios. So we have seen a huge advancement in the last year around the adoption of AI and the ability for AI to shorten the time it takes to create content. And in order to create that content, it's becoming an awful lot more affordable. We're not quite there yet, but soon, very soon, we're going to be able to take a two-dimensional photo or video and use the AI tools, which we have as a company, and I know other companies have as well, to translate that into an optimized 3D image that we're then able to drop into a VR scenario. And we can do that in minutes instead of currently, to do an optimized environment can take up to 10 days. So when we're starting to utilize AI for productivity gains like that, we're really starting to see some huge advancements in the ability for companies to create their own content. And if they can create their own content like they do with e-learning, or like they do with the face-to-face type of training, and they don't need coders in their organization, and they can deliver it through their learning and development teams, we're going to see it adopted a lot more wider, and will become very mainstream I believe by the end of next year. This is going to be a reality, especially how fast the AI is going. And then I would say, where do we see it heading towards? I mean, I love these things. These are the Meta glasses, and these are not just a gimmick. We're launching things in these in a few months that provide some incredible assistance in training. And you're utilizing AI, you're utilizing generative AI as a coach, and they're passed through. Obviously, you see everything around you, but you're able to bring in AR scenarios that again make the training more effective, more real world, and also easily adoptable. So some of those things I see in the next year. It's very hard in our industry to see, where is it going to be in 5 years? Because if you asked me this question last year, I would not have thought AI would have taken us to the spaces that we're now currently enjoying today. And that advancement is going so fast. It's really exciting, massively exciting to see where it can go. And I think the very first question was around the adoption of the hardware. Hardware is driving the software at the moment. So where the hardware's developments and advancements are going, it allows us as software deliverers and developers to adopt this technology in a much more rapid way. And our job is to ensure that the experiences that we deliver to customers, organizations, and enterprises, it is easy. It's not complicated. And that's all of our jobs, to ensure that the hardware fits really well and seamlessly with the software. And so the organizations cannot just adopt it, but they understand it out of the box, and we can debunk some of these misconceptions of, 5 years ago when they first tried VR, it was a very, very different experience. And now it is very easily adoptable. It is cost effective and also incredibly powerful learning and development tool.
And I think AI provides that real personalization as well. So obviously you touched upon like being able to have like custom 3D environments very quickly soon, but also that feedback that people can get from AI. Like we no longer have to have branched learning scenarios that are quite static, ultimately quite predictable. Everything can be much more adaptive for the learner, which I think is also crucial for helping to change employees' mindsets around training and training being boring, that actually VR and with AI as well provides a great opportunity to tap into that like kind of negative, if we're being honest, perception of training.
And that was only just this last year. I mean, see how incredible it could be, in the next couple of years. You have endless possibilities with AI training in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Gloria has asked on LinkedIn, can you share what brand they are? They are the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, Gloria. So yeah, you can get them online, readily available. So I'll go to, first of all, just do a couple of questions that were sent in before the webinar, but then I want to focus on the live questions. Just a quick fire question. Can we use VR with children, teenagers? Yeah, with children and teenagers, basically. David.
Yeah, our recommendation is 13 plus. So, your teenagers can absolutely use it. We see it deployed in a variety of high schools for STEM classes, personal use. Parents use it for, soft skills training as well. So there's definitely a variety of use cases.
Great, thank you. And what metrics should organizations track or measure to evaluate the success of VR learning programs?
We use an ROI calculator, and in that ROI calculator, the metrics that are important is time saved from traditional training to VR, and the other key outcome is learning outcomes. So, how effective is your learning at a conclusion of VR training? And it's one thing to look at ticking the boxes of your training, but if you really do want to move the needle and increase a certain behavior, that is a really important metric to focus on. But we see that ROI calculator has been integral to the executive who's usually sponsoring the program. They want to be able to report back on how effective the training is, and so often they're looking at all the different areas that you're saving, and that is travel. There's a lot of travel is saved, so that's better for the environment. It's also better for the checkbook because you're not having to bring people from all over wherever you are to one central place. So it's anywhere, anytime training, and then often you're translating that training from sometimes. In our experience, 8 hours in a classroom can be delivered in 20 minutes in a headset. And that is a huge productivity gain for organizations that have to do a certain amount of training, whether it's compliance training, and you're able to deliver that in a fraction of the time. All of those things translate to a really strong ROI.
Yeah. And just to add upon that, like most of that training and ROI calculation, and James has a great one, is really focused on one use case. You still have the headset, and the ability to use it with multiple use cases just expand how valuable the programs can be. And again, I think it's so important to understand what is the friction, how do we actually decrease that with productivity gains, whether it's time savings, retention, outcomes, and categorize that all together in a nice shared doc with the leadership team.
How are Meta, VirtualSpeech, and SkillsVR working together? So who wants to share about our work together?
I'll start. So as an organization, very early on, we tried to do all things to everyone. You know, we were creating content, we had a platform, and we're obviously working with Meta with the best of breed headsets. But very quickly, we worked out that in order for our customers to be successful, because if our customers aren't successful, we're not successful. So if our customers want to be successful, we had to go and scour the world to find the very best content. And that's when we came to VirtualSpeech. VirtualSpeech's content is second to none. And the use of generative AI and the different scenarios that you've been able to create, we wanted that to be available to our customers through a marketplace. And so that's how we worked with VirtualSpeech, and we love the partnership, and our customers love the partnership because it has to be easy for a customer. You know, at the end of the day, I know we're in this business and we know where all these different pieces are around the world, but our customer wants to be able to go to a platform, which SkillsVR has, and they're able to choose from all of our different partners the content that is relevant for them. So we don't need to be the best of creation of all that content. We need to be a great collaborator, and we need to be make that solution simple for our customers. And we love working with Meta because, in simple terms, Meta has the best hardware on the market at the best price. There is nothing that comes close to an enterprise headset or wearables when it comes to glasses in the market. And it's affordable. So when you're working in enterprise and you're thinking about customers who have 1,000 or 10,000 headsets, they're not in the game of spending $3,000 for a headset. They want to have the best effective headset at the best price. So that's where we see the collaborative partnerships, and we're starting to see that a lot more. You know, when we're starting to look at the best content providers, the best platform suppliers, and also the best hardware. And hardware is useless without the software, and software is useless without the hardware. So that's the collaborative approach that we have to take. And we're starting to see it more and more. I mean, we're still a very new industry, but I'm really excited about the partnerships that, you know, we're forming, and it makes our customers successful. And when they're successful, we're successful.
Yeah, I think James hit it right on the head. Everything is baked on our customers' success. If their programs don't work, if they're not getting value out of it, then, you know, there's no purpose in them having it. And we aren't in the game of selling headsets to sit on the shelf. You know, we want them actively used, and in order for them to be used, we have to have great software partners such as yourselves for VirtualSpeech and SkillsVR. I mean, you know, like James said, you know, it goes hand in hand. There is no application or training module if there is no software. We simply provide a great hardware. We provide some environments and spaces for people to collaborate in, and we have some management of you know, Quest for Business for software wise. But as far as content goes, we rely heavily on VirtualSpeech, SkillsVR to develop some great content that's really impactful for our customers' success. And that's really the value of our collaboration. I mean, we all have to work together in order to make a successful ecosystem and a successful platform for our customers to use. And I want to double click on the ease part. Hopefully whoever's out there, you know, starting a VR program can be easy. I think some people sometimes overcomplicate it. They think too much about it. They want to do some custom POCs and this and that, but you know, a lot of it's just getting the experience in there, getting the buyer, not buyer, but the buy-in within the company, and starting. It is actually somewhat easy to do depending on what you guys are trying to accomplish, and could really make some great impact with something that's very simple.
Yeah. And we'll put a link at the end of this webinar to the skills bundle that we're all working on together. And so you can get started very easily. I'm just going to go to some live questions. And I just wanted to highlight something that Rob Terrell has said, which I think is just interesting. So they are prototyping an intelligent tutoring system using the Meta smart glasses at the moment. And they're taking a 3-phased approach. And phase 1 is using the Ray-Ban smart glasses, computer vision and AI with select data sets chosen by the college. And then the student is able to point to part of an anatomical model and have a discussion around organ function, disease, etc. So there's an instant use case for anybody who is new. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Rob. Just got 2 questions. So Katrina's asked, do you guys have any transportation companies using VR training?
Yes, we do. This comes back to the DC businesses that we work closely with, like Amazon, KeHE in the US, really large distribution centers that center around distribution, and obviously transport is a very heavy part of that. We also work closely with a large transport company in Australia, and a lot of it comes down to safety. So the safety vanning of, but also safety in the actual driving. So we do driver training as well, and that is all around awareness of the challenges that they face in the cab and actually physically driving, all the way through to dispatch, how they come into dispatch, how they load, how they unload, and also how they interact around forklifts is a really key and critical learning as well.
And Katrina, we will put both David and James's contact information at the end of the webinar as well. So if you want to message them directly about that, to learn more about that use case, you definitely can. Conscious we've only got 3 minutes left, where has the time gone? So we have a question on YouTube. Do you have advice for assessing VR versus other traditional tech? So sometimes our organization is treating VR tools like a flat screen software when it comes to procurement criteria. So accessibility, security, which, and they're comparing that to online software, which obviously has different criteria for that. So I guess one I can think of is around like vision. So from an accessibility point of view, when that's 2D, that is easier to provide accessible measures for, whereas it's a bit more difficult when it comes to VR. So do you have any advice around that?
I personally think that, and we see this, by the way, in a variety of industries, whether it's healthcare to financial firms to automotive. And I think that there has to be a little bit of mind shift change with the IT teams as well as security teams and HR teams, and understanding that because the technology is somewhat new, we have to be a little bit more open about how we evaluate them. So whether it's security, and what we typically see is we see security questionnaires that are very specific for a mobile device or a computer, but they're not the same as a VR, and they're missing key components, which we try to educate them, and we try to share and support and help them understand, like, they're, what are the things that you need to look for. So it does take a little bit of education, but, and again, I think as we ramp and continue to build, people are going to understand the specific things they need to ask for VR. That's maybe going to be different from your traditional SaaS software or your laptop per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. And final question, because I'm just conscious of time. Will any of you be at AECT in October? That's the first question. For the first half of that question, is anybody going? Because Gloria will be presenting there on the 22nd, if you are. Gloria also asks if any of us are doing research around VR learning.
Yes, we're doing research. We have a research division in our team because it becomes incredibly important to ensure that we provide the most up-to-date and relevant information to our enterprises. But we often try and work with other organizations to collaborate around that, and Meta is one of those. And I know Meta spend a lot of time around the research space as well to ensure that we are providing the most up-to-date information relative to whatever the use case might be. We're not at AECT. I'm not sure about you, David.
I don't believe we're attending. I'll double check on that. We are going to AES later this year in October, and then EDUCAUSE as well. So those are similar to your events, plus a couple in EMEA. But as far as research, we actually are a pretty large research company here at Meta, and we do research from just understanding how the eyes work, down to, you know, our wearables devices. So there's quite a lot of research. And the good thing about what we're doing in research, we do publicize it very openly. So all researchers write papers that allow people to understand the impact of the studies that we're doing. So.
And just so that you've got an answer from virtual speech there as well, we won't be attending AECT, but we will be at AES in October and DevLearn in November. If there's anybody listening who is attending them, please do come say hi. So that concludes our webinar today. So if anybody would like to contact any of this month's guests, their details should be about to show on the screen now. And then, yeah, basically, feel free to contact any one of us. I just realised my details aren't there, but you can contact me, sophie@virtualspeech.com. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, David and James, and to everybody who came and listened and asked us questions. And yeah, hope you have a good day. This will be available to watch back on YouTube as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie.